Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel, talking about the transfer portal and pending NFL decisions and how it will impact Texas as Steve Sarkisian and company build this roster for 2026. As always, this edition of the Recruiting Breakdown here at On Texas Football is brought to you by our good friend Mark Saunders. Gerry, let everybody know about Mark Saunders Allstate.
That is Texas alum Mark Saunders. He's the only insurance agent you'll need. He is in the Austin and Round Rock area in the entire state of Texas. He has everything covered, everything from your home, car, boat, motorcycle, RV, ATV, everything you got. Mark Saunders is your man. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Our On Texas Football guarantee is you'll be in great hands with the over 35 years of experience that Texas alum Mark Saunders brings to the table for all your insurance needs. Give him a call, again, at 512-218-8571.
We got a break from outgoing departures, whether it's the portal or the NFL over the weekend, but it started back up on Monday, and one of each. Leonga Howe headed to the portal. DeAndre Moore headed to the NFL draft. Guys, we got 5 guys to break down here. And, Gerry, I'll start with you, and each of you guys just feel free to any intel, feelings, whatever, opinions. We'll start with Trevor Goozby, Gerry, because of the 5 guys we're going to talk about, literally and figuratively, that's the biggest one.
Yeah, it really is. Starting left tackle. He's getting some projections as a mid to late first rounder, early second rounder. I think the intel this through the weekend and early this week has continued to be the same. There's a lot of positivity that Trevor Goozby may return to Texas for a final season. Yes, his brother Austin is signed with Sean Miller in the basketball program. That is part of it. Parents could watch them both play at Texas 1 year. But I think more than anything, if Trevor Goozby does announce he's returning to Texas, look, one, I would say for Texas fans, he instantly probably becomes a fan favorite because he's turning down a lot of money. And yes, NIL is great, but if he returns, he's turned down a lot of money. And the question would be, why would you turn down $8 to $10 million? It's a couple of reasons. One, you feel like there's some unfinished business. Coach Shipley talked about on Coffee and Football Tuesday morning about how Colt and Jordan felt like they had unfinished business at Texas and was part of their return. Now, money's a lot different nowadays than it was then, especially if you're a potential first-round pick. The other part is I think Trevor Goozby in his circle, if he returns again, this is the if he returns, which things are trending positively, but they still have to get up to the finish line, is that it's easy to just for them to say, oh, just go into the draft and go get paid, right? The other part of that, though, is adding more strength, continue to add technique and refine your game so that when you go into the draft, you have the ability to stay for a long time for sure. You continue your path and process at the college level of what you set out to do when there was a plan of, okay, this is – through 4 years, this is how when you get strong enough to go, you add to that frame, you build your technique. Or again, a basketball player that came to football a little later, it's more of a process for those guys. And when you go pro, you're ready to be a 10-year pro. I think that's the thing I'm looking at with Trevor Goozby and his decision. Yes, if he stays at Texas, yes, he feels like there's some unfinished business. But 2, it's when you go to the NFL draft, you're ready to be a 10-year pro, not be a guy that is projectable as a pro.
Yeah, I totally agree there. A guy in that same conversation to me is Trey Wisner, and I know that we've talked about what his decision would mean. We know Texas is going to be active in the portal. I was told that he and Jabbar Jalouk had a great conversation over the weekend. That was their first initial meeting. Obviously, that will play a factor. And whether or not he returns or not, Texas and Trey Wisner still obviously have to come to an agreement, a decision on NIL. Where do they want to go in that regard as well? But look, that first initial meeting, I think, played a pretty big role or will play a pretty big role for Trey Wisner. And again, I've heard he's off to the league. I've heard he's coming back. Everybody's kind of all over the place here, but initial returns there are positive for Texas and Wisner to return for his senior year.
Yeah, to me, Trey Wisner's decision comes down to how much can you improve your draft stock if you come back. And I think having a better year where he's healthier can put some more good tape out there. Look, we know running back's a position, whether he comes back or not, they're going to attack running back in the portal. But I think if you can add, I know Jaden Bond, if he enters the portal, there's going to be names at the top of everybody's list. But if you could add like a really good, maybe not even a sledgehammer back, but a really good kind of 1A, 1B with Trey Wisner, I think he could have a really productive senior year. And Trevor Goozby, Gerry, I'm with you 100%. I think one thing we've got to remember as it relates to the NFL decisions, the NFL is no longer a developmental league.
Yes.
They want guys to be as close to finished products as possible. If not, developmental guys, you're not spending second and third round picks on developmental guys anymore. Those are going to be 5th, 6th round picks, as we saw last year with Quinn Ewers and Cam Williams. 5-10 years ago, those guys would have probably been day 2 picks. Now they're at the back end of the draft. So I think if you're Trevor Goozby, could he go be a Marius Mims where he goes and has limited starting experience and tests off the charts and ends up being a top 20 pick? Absolutely he could. But I think you just solidified a little bit better if you come back. I think those are the 2 guys where the decisions, to me, Gerry, really could go one way or the other. And there's good arguments for both. The other 3 guys, let's start with Hero Kanu, who's got 1 year of eligibility left, but he's kind of in a similar situation where he's got 1 really good year on tape. Does he need another one to really solidify his NFL stock?
He's interesting of the 5 guys we're talking about because he's the guy that wasn't on the NFL radar at all before this year. And now he's vaulted into where he's potentially a mid-round pick if he comes out. And so the key there is, do you strike while the iron's hot? You had a healthy season. You had 2 seasons at Ohio State where you develop, you come to Texas, get continued development, you show versatility, and you have a fully healthy season and a productive season. Can you replicate that twice in a row? That's the question, right? Because we saw Murad Watson transferred in at D tackle, and he was banged up the last 9 games of the year. So Hero Kanu's coming off a fully healthy season. He's had 3 years of kind of owning his craft there and developing from a guy who's super raw coming out of high school to the college level. He's got an interesting decision to make. I know Texas wants him back. I don't really have a definitive answer on what he will do. It's been very quiet, CJ, on Hero Kanu.
Yeah, and I remember talking to him after the game against A&M. He said, look, I'm going to sit back, talk to my representatives, my family, my coaches, everybody that has a say or has an opinion, and kind of weigh my options. Of course, NFL scouts and coaches will eventually have a conversation there. On the flip side of that, and going to the secondary, look, we got to talk about Jelani McDonald as well. That's a guy who would be drafted if he declared. Now, I've talked to some folks in his camp who say if he comes back and he continues on this trajectory and puts together a similar style of 2026 play that we've seen Texas DBs take, he could be a top 50 pick in the 2026 draft. He has the length, he has the physicality. Oh, and he makes turnovers happen out of thin air, it seems like almost every other weekend. So that's something to keep an eye on. I do think right now he is leaning in the direction of returning with the hope of putting together one big final senior season before departing to the league as well. We've seen that time and time again with Texas DBs, Jahdae Barron being the most recent. Obviously, Michael Tapp did as well for a 5th year. Jelani McDonald looking at potentially following that mold as well.
Yeah, and look, Hero Kanu, Gerry, the argument you make, I think there's something to be said for that. Not as extreme, but I said the same thing about Deshaun Elliott after the 2017 season. Like, look, when you've got an All-America season, you're a Thorpe Award finalist, like, you got to cash that lottery ticket and kind of take your chances. With Hero Kanu, it is a roll of the dice because Texas will be deep enough at interior D-line that if you get injured and miss a couple of games, you could really have your snap totals cut into, especially, Alex January is emerging as an NFL caliber guy. We know the young guys the staff is really excited about. One thing, and as we get into Jack injuries too, who's the 5th guy we got to talk about, I'll say this about Wisner and McDonald, and to a lesser extent injuries, CJ, those guys don't play premium positions. So to be a 1st-round pick, if Jelani McDonald wants to be a 1st-round pick, even as you said, a top 50 pick, you've got to really be at the tippy top of the safety board. In other words, if you're the 5th best safety in the draft, you may be waiting till the 3rd or 4th round to hear your name called because NFL teams just don't value that position. Running back, we've seen it fluctuate as the league favors, but tight end is interesting, CJ, and it feels like Jack injuries came to Texas with the idea he would be a one-and-done type guy.
Yeah, and it's hard not to, right? He put up a big season a year ago for a Cal offense that struggled, which is crazy to say because, it was Jaden Ott, Fernando Mendoza, and, Jack injuries, but they didn't have much passing success, mostly because, well, Fernando Mendoza took 42 sacks last year. But point being, moving to Texas, I think he expected, obviously, was, hey, my production would match that. We saw it against Texas A&M, but it was a pretty inconsistent road all the way through. Not to mention, I think Texas wants more physicality at that tight end spot. Do they get it out of Jack injury should he return? I think that's one of the question marks in his game at the NFL level as well. But altogether, there's enough production there to get drafted. And I know that we're starting to see more and more of those NFL mock drafts and big boards for tight ends include him kind of in that 4 to 7 range is kind of how this draft is shaken out to be for Jack injuries. But can he elevate his game after one more year? I think Texas would take him back, obviously. He's a heck of a talent. Now it's up to him to make that decision.
And Gerry, what CJ just said, I think that bears repeating. All 5 of these guys, Texas would welcome all 5 of these guys back. The chances of them getting all 5 back, though, I don't know if I'd put a very high percentage on that.
Well, the problem is the NIL world, right? What does a player's ask? What does Texas think that player's worth? So are all 5 guys going to have the same asking price that Texas says yes to? I think that's the big unknown outside of what we're talking about with NFL decisions is what does their agent bring to the table to Texas? Because that can change things in a hurry.
No doubt. Gerry, let's move on and talk a little high school recruiting, one that Texas may have left on the board. We'll see. The Michigan situation, I feel like we're talking about it every day here on the channel, and that's Malachi Lee, the big offensive tackle, signed with Michigan. Is he going to get out of his letter of intent? If he does, you figure Texas would be the top choice. Gerry, what's the latest, though, with Malachi Lee as we sit here right now?
Yeah, so I think the thing with Malachi Lee is he's a midterm graduate. I think he's scheduled to play in the Navy All-America Bowl in San Antonio, which is on January 10th, and he'll be moving to a college right after that. So he doesn't have a lot of time to entertain teams that would be new coming onto his radar if he asked for that release from Michigan, which a lot of people, or not a lot, people I've talked to behind the scenes do think that will happen. But we'll see. We got to wait and see, right, until that becomes official because we're just going to say good chance, but you got to wait until he says something on that. So it leads you down the path of where did he officially visit? Well, he picked Michigan over Texas. He also made OVs to Alabama and Georgia. Well, Alabama has an offensive line spot in their class as well, just like Texas does. Sam Utu flip to SMU out of Orange, California. So obviously Alabama would probably have an interest in Malachi Lee. Texas was talking to Malachi Lee up until the night before signing day earlier this month. They had stayed on him pretty much the whole way through. We're having some good conversations. At the end of the day, he decided to stay with Michigan. So I think Texas has an advantage that they've been in that fight for weeks, if not months, even throughout his senior season. I'm not sure Alabama was in the fight as much as Texas was. But when you have a shorter time frame to make a decision, I mean, we're less than a month of when he's going to report to a college. It's unlikely somebody's going to come out of the blue and just jump into the race. So I look for it if he requests his release, unless Georgia comes into play somehow, but they got 5 OLs in their class already. I expect it to be Texas versus Bama, and we'll see which way it goes. But I think Texas would feel pretty good about their chances if he asks for a release and is granted it.
CJ, real quick, the Malachi Lee, if Texas does end up getting Malachi Lee when the dust settles, it doesn't change the fact that they're going to attack interior offensive line in the portal. But CJ, with the moves that have gone down, Leonga Lafau head out of the program, DeAndre Moore head out of the program, and then these 5 decisions that we talked about, did any of those change the math in terms of where you're thinking Texas needs to go from a number standpoint at any of the positions they've targeted?
You know, it's interesting because I still see, obviously, wide receiver is going to be a spot they attack. I wonder, you know, do they take 1 or 2 running backs? I think that's dependent upon the decision of Trey Wisner, even if that guy, that second back, is someone that they use kind of in that Keelan Robinson or Ryan Niblett role, maybe just an enhanced kind of scat back player. And then linebacker is really interesting because, look, we've talked about it. We know Tyler Atkinson's going to be on the field. But do they take one of those guys that they can spin down in specific packages like a Brad Spence? You know, I think that the numbers are going to be ever fluid over the next month because, look, we're still sitting here wondering, you know, how many more offensive linemen in or how many defensive backs does Texas look at on top of that, Texas has a very crowded room at the wide receiver spot. We've only seen, now 2 departures, 1 to the league, 1 to the portal. What additional movement still to come? I think that exit number still sits around 20. Texas hovering around 10 now with a couple more decisions still to be made in regards to the NFL. The portal will still be on the table for those guys as well, but it all comes down to who of which position depart before Texas starts to address full-time in the portal.
All right, one more time, Gerry, let's thank our longtime sponsor here on the Recruiting Breakdown. That's Mark Saunders, Allstate.
Texas alum Mark Saunders. He has all your insurance needs serving the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. That means he's the only insurance agent you'll need. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and even the ATV. If you got one of those, call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Who would you trust more than a fellow Texas alum for all your insurance needs? Again, call Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571.
Guys, we're going to go around the horn here. Each of us are going to pick a guy in the 2026 class to be an instant impact player. And I'm glad we're doing this because I went back and pulled. CJ, is actually a question you asked Sark during the signing day press conference for a piece I wrote over at ontexasfootball.com on Monday. And he was basically talking about signing day in relation to the NFL draft, saying, hey, we've got some really high-end first-round picks. And you start to look at the top of the board and you say, okay, we can identify who those first-round picks are. And similar, Gerry, to the NFL conversation we just had, you're not using first-round picks on developmental guys anymore. No. You're using first-round picks on guys that can come in and help you right away, especially with the rookie wage scale and the salary cap and everything else. So with that in mind, Gerry, I'll let you go first. Who, in your opinion, is the guy who you think will or maybe needs to have the biggest impact in 2026?
Yeah, so we all took 3 guys, and after I say mine, I think people have some easy guesses on who y'all's is. But I went Richard Wesley. And I'm not saying he's going to start the most games or play the most snaps, but I will say this. Look at what Lance Jackson did as a freshman at Texas. And when you look at this Texas edge room, Richard Wesley could end up being the backup to Lance Jackson pretty easily out of spring practice. And if he does that, look, he's very similar. He's physically ready to compete. Even though he's a reclass from 27 to 26 and is young, physically he's ready to compete. I watched him work out with Trey Lewis this summer. He works out with a bunch of NFL guys. He has a plan. He's not coming out of high school totally raw as a pass rusher. He understands hand usage. He's weighing over 260 pounds or right around there, 255 right now. So he's probably going to be in that 265, 270 range in next August. And he's going to be built really well. And he's been coached really well. He's been trained really well. He's been a productive player. I could see a scenario where he plays Lance Jackson level snaps as the season moves along behind Lance Jackson, as Lance Jackson did behind Ethan Burke. If that comes to fruition, because I've said all along since I saw Richard Wesley, I think he's got first, second round NFL draft potential. If he stays healthy, you got to have luck there and maintains the path he's on. Well, we saw what that looked like with Lance Jackson as a true freshman this year in a reserve role.
Yeah, my guy, I think it has to be Jermaine Bishop.
The
reason why I went with Jermaine Bishop is on offense with DeAndre Moore moving on. I thought about this actually on Monday night, with DeAndre Moore officially moving on. Like, hey, CJ, so you mentioned something earlier. Hey, do you maybe go into the portal now and look for a slot receiver, kind of a one-for-one replacement for DeAndre Moore? Well, why go into the portal when you've got a guy as a freshman who can probably come in and give you something right off the bat? He's electric with the ball in his hands. You got to have the ball in his hands. We know if freshman wide receivers are ready, Sark will put them on the field. He did it with Xavier Worthy in 2021, and we've seen him do it with other guys. And if for whatever reason Ryan Niblett's not back at Texas next season, he can be your punt returner right out of the gate. So I think with the ball in his hands, Jermaine Bishop has to be that guy. So Gerry went Richard Wesley. I went Jermaine Bishop. I guess everybody needs 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count, CJ, to figure out who you went with for the impact guy.
Yeah, I don't know if it's much of a surprise, but you go out and you get a guy that was a finalist for the Butkus Award in the high school level across every single linebacker in the country, Tyler Atkinson. And Gerry, I know we've both gotten to see him in person a couple times. I mean, it's everything that creates the makeup of Tyler Atkinson that gets me excited. And beyond just obviously the physical attributes, it's the mental side. It's, hey, I'm a vocal leader. I'm a guy that gets my ducks in line on the sideline, right? It's what you hope your middle linebacker and play caller and really your main, vocal piece in the middle of your defense to be. And I think that's exactly what Tyler Atkinson brings to the table at the next level. I'm excited to see it. My goodness, I just don't know if I'm more excited for anybody else in this class than Atkinson, given that we know that there's going to be an immediate path to the field already presented to him at that linebacker spot.
All right, Gerry, CJ, thank you guys for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to Mark Saunders, Allstate, for sponsoring this edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. If you're not a member, over at ontexasfootball.com, that's all right. You can get over to the site right now and sign up using the promo code OTFOG, and that'll get you 1 year of access for just $39.95. Make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or on the site, you're not missing any of our recruiting coverage all year round. For Gerry, for CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, hook 'em.
Hook 'em.